Hey there, Banditos. Welcome to the Wednesday episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits. I'm Mike Farah, and today we have a fresh new episode to serve up to you. It is with Bill Willingham, artist turned writer artist. You know him from the Elementals primarily, but probably even more so Fables, which is a series from Vertigo based on a number of different fairy tales, all living together and trying to make a life for themselves in New York City and elsewhere. It went for many, many issues, over 150, all of which were written by Bill. And it's just a humongous series. But he's done more than that, of course. He had a big run on Robin, Shadow Pact, which brought together a lot of DC's magical heroes, Warriors 3, another co-created project called Legendary, Derry, kind of a steampunk version of some other familiar characters, and has a lot more in the pipeline. So let's hear it from the man himself. This is Bill Willingham, and we are very excited to have writer, creator Bill Willingham with us. Bill, how you doing?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Well, that's well.
Good. It's started off great already. Uh, let's go with our patented first question, which you may already know if you've seen any of our episodes, which is, how did you discover comic books?
Oh, okay. So that's like that inside the actor's studio where he always asks the same questions of each guest. That's great. I didn't know it was standardized. Um,
Only
Look,
the first one.
yeah, I discovered comic books. I don't remember how. I was young, part of a large family. My father was stationed in Germany. This was from 1959 to 1962. And we didn't have TV on the post. We read since I was too young, but had lots of older sisters. I was mostly read too. Um, but the nice thing of having an entire battalion of older sisters in the house, half of whom I thought were other grown, like other moms and dads in some way I couldn't figure. They were the age gap was there, but they were mostly bored enough to where if I pestered one of them to read me one of the comics that were kind of just floating around, um, they would. And that's probably how I learned to read. But on an army post or on the army post at the time, uh, I have no idea where the comics came from. They just existed. And from time to time, when we'd read all the comics in our house, or had read them, had them read to me, um, we'd load up our uh, wagon with comics and just go door to door in the housing projects, the military quarters, uh, and just trade comics with whoever else was willing to do it. And it had nothing. This was not collector's mentality. The only standards was, have I read it or not? And we would sit in a living room floor with our stacks of comics, together, and go through each other's stack and set aside the ones we haven't read yet. Uh, Possibly ones that I had read before and wanted to read again. Um, the the 32 page comics counted as one, the double size counted as two, and that was it. That was the medium of exchange, and we just did it for as long as I can remember. um, I remember at some point during my time there, we left Germany when I was 5, but I'd started reading them on my own. So I assume sisters and or kindergarten and first grade did a just excellent job. Um, but they were just there, uh, beat up, traded many times, lacking covers often. Uh, and only when we got back to the States did I discover that kids in the new neighborhood didn't do that. Um, I think we initiated it a little bit, my brother and I, but we actually had to go buy them, which seemed odd.
They go from a currency of exchange to a piece of valuable commodity, I guess, for those kids in the neighborhood to use their hard-earned money on.
Yes, and eventually I started placing value in them when I began to realize that this is the scam, the caper, the gig I wanted to be part of. So I started trying to hold on to them, flummoxed by my mother from time to time, who, when anytime cousins or such would visit, she'd send them home with my entire collection of comics, and I'd have to start again.
Now, did you realize from the beginning, you may have been too young, but I always like to hear, because a lot of us start reading comics and get into the stories and the characters, but don't think about it initially as there being people behind the scenes that are actually creating these books. Did you sort of glom onto that from the beginning, that there was someone writing and drawing and that this is something you could actually do?
I eventually became aware, and it was I was a fan of uh, Jack Kirby comics, although I did not know there was anyone named Jack Kirby. But sometimes um, the characters look different than when some other artist drew them, and I began to realize, um, because of that, that it's like, oh, different people are drawing these. The same with Archie comics. My sisters loved those, and so we had a bunch of those in the house. And even though they were more rigidly drawn on model, you could see different artists like Dan DiCarlo, etc., would draw it differently than, well, say I'm going to space everyone's name, but one of the other Archie artists, and I began to realize how different people draw these things. When I became aware of that, um, it's I became fans of the artists as well as the characters. I'm not sure I did I answer your question?
Yeah, no,
Okay,
absolutely.
good.
Um, and you actually started out as an artist. And what I've read is that you've taken a, I guess, somewhat unusual path towards comics. At least I hadn't heard of this particular journey before, but you started with role-playing games. Is that correct, first of all? And how did you kind of fall into that space?
Well, it's sort of correct. At some point, I decided that this is what I was going to try and do. I I uh, I was interested in police work, and I was interested in drawing comics. Those were my two, whatever. A little bit of acting, but I had realized by the time it was time to kind of choose a path, that the acting business takes a tremendous discipline and work ethic and drive, but the payoff is less likely than in others. Whereas in comics, I sort of was aware that there's only a few um, people working in the industry. It wasn't as huge as, like, the entertainment industry. So that helped me narrow it down. And as far as police work, um, we were a military family from a long line of military families. It was not a matter of if I would uh, join any military service. It was when, and um, my dad, being a benevolent soul, said, "Look, I will even let you pick the service to go into, but you are going to serve your country." And then he told me, "But if you pick the Navy, we're going to have a long talk about how I joined the Navy, did 4 years, quit, joined the Army, and was in for life." Um, so uh, I didn't pick the Navy, so I missed out on that conversation. But it sounded like uh, there were some pretty good anecdotes in store if I had. Um, but there was after a couple of years of college, which I could not continue to do because I had no money. My parents at the time, they owned an asparagus farm. Asparagus, they did a little corn, some grapes, but they were worth too much money on paper and dirt poor in reality, because everything was in a farm, and farmers don't have a lot of walking around money. So after 2 years of college, where I was taking every uh, a full time job and then three work study jobs to try and afford it, and then one by one, those work study jobs were taken away when they found rules that no student can have more than one at a time, and I couldn't afford to keep doing it. And I got pretty sick by um, you know working almost 24-hour days and getting no sleep and lots of effort. Anyway,
That'll do it.
so 2 years of college, I decided, well, I guess if I'm going to check that box for military service, now's a good time. Um, and I signed up. They had a delayed enlistment. I had a couple of weeks before I had to report. Um, in in the Sunnyside, Washington Rexall drugstore, I was looking for paperbacks, and Gordon Lightfoot's "If You Could Read My Mind" was playing. I go, that's all about storytelling. Oh, I got to pursue comics. I'll do my 3 years, but and I joined the MP so I could get a little taste of the police work.
Yeah.
But no, I'm gonna do comics as fast as I can reasonably do, and ended up drawing them all through my military service. As a matter of fact, I left basic training richer than any other recruit, because as soon as people found out I could draw, they paid me far too much money. First time, most of us in the Army had like real walking around money of our own, um, but they paid me far too much to draw each and every person in my platoon in full Class A's uniform, but with the police belt, holding a smoking 45, and the MP regalia. Um, I spent the entire time doing that, and yeah, uh, left with quite a bit of money in my pocket. Um, but yeah, I did my 3 years. During those 3 years, someone introduced me to Dungeons and Dragons. Um, we played a lot of it because for the first year of my enlistment, we guarded nukes in an X area, which is a classified site. And when you guard nukes, um, basically your job is to watch grass grow, because unless someone's going to come and take them, you don't do much about other than sit there and hope that someone does, because we really wanted to shoot someone. not out of anger or bloodlust, but because um, in Germany, which my first station was kind of miserable. It was out in the middle of nowhere where they put sites like that, and it, we were just bored silly. But there was a rumor that if you do shoot someone, the first thing the army does is pack you up and get you back to the states so that you can't possibly have to go through a foreign legal system.
Right.
Um, I don't know if that was true or not. It's one of those truisms that everyone in the barracks knew, but who knows if it was true. But yeah, we were all like maybe I can shoot someone and you know go home. But then I got stationed up in Bremerhaven, white hat duty, like real police work, and uh, and that was too much fun and too much excitement. So as a police, not officer, because officers were officers, as a police patrolman, I wasn't nearly as eager to gun someone down uh, as in the first year. But anyway, we played lots of D&D because as we're in the towers guarding these nukes in the X area, um, we had a radio for official communication, but a landline. All the towers were hooked up, and it was hooked up with the front room, and uh, uh, just so that we could talk to each other and keep from going bonkers. We couldn't read because that would take our attention off of our guard area. But we could yak with each other as often as we want, and we started playing a D&D game over the phone system. We couldn't take dice out there because that would be distracted. So in the front room, I was a communications guy in the front room. Um, I would run a game with everyone on there for our entire 12-hour shift. And the sergeant who couldn't understand this game at all that worked in the front room, but they would roll the dice for all of the players, and they would actually campaign to, I roll more 20s than this guy or what have you. They took pride in getting people in our game to sign up with them to be their dice roller. Um, During that time, I saw that there was uh, availability for an artist at TSR about the time I was getting out. I applied, got it, came in through Fort Dix, New Jersey, took a weekend before I went out to Lake Geneva um, to show up for my job. Took a weekend in New York to visit Marvel Comics. It was a Saturday. It never occurred to me that they wouldn't be open on Saturday. I rode the elevator up. The door was wide open. I wandered through these empty bullpen for a long time, trying to figure out which desk John Byrne drew from. I did not know that they all worked from home. So I'm trying to figure this out, and I was there for maybe a couple of hours, just rooting through stuff, looking through pages and stuff, until a janitor found me and kicked me out. Said, "No, you can't be in here." And I said something like, "Okay, but do you know which of these art tables John Byrne works at?" And he goes, "This one." He just pointed to one at random. This guy didn't know nothing. But anyway, if people had been there and I'd been able to show them my stuff, I would have skipped gaming and gone directly into, if it was good enough to get accepted. It wasn't. I would have quit that weekend, just not shown up for TSR and just stayed in New York. Didn't work out that way. The janitor did not hire me. Although working for my father's janitorial service for many, many years, I was highly qualified. I could have gotten a job, but just not the one I wanted. So that's my long rambling thing. So I ended up at TSR, drew, my foot was out the door. even as like from the first day. They all knew that as soon as I could get comics work, I was gone.
I mean, wow, what that's definitely an odyssey from the beginnings, the end of college through to getting this game work and then your first comics work. You said you had some walking around money from doing these profiles or portraits of the MPs. I think you came out not only richer monetarily, but you got more drawing experience from doing that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
that's
before
double
the
benefit.
army, one of the things I did trying to um, pay for college was I would do local ad work, and I would do um, the sketch artists that do funny sketches of the big head customer
Oh,
who's
like caricatures?
in a canoe or whatever like that. Well, I couldn't do that. I wasn't interested in character sketches, but the same group that would send out sketch artists as a sideline also wanted people that could actually just capture someone's formal uh, portrait uh, in a pencil kind of thing. So I got a lot of experience doing that. I was able to get just enough of um, their real image to make them happy. And since they were standing there holding a smoking 45, having just shot someone, and every one of them sent them back to their wife and or girlfriend, and a few of them had to come back a few times because wife and or girlfriend said bye bye and didn't return the thing, so they had to have a new one for their new girl. Um, but yeah, yeah, I made some good money, and I was frugal. I mean, no one really needs to spend much in the army because food, shelter, all that's provided, uniforms. So I socked it away. I knew that I would need to live off of anything I could put away for a while, assuming that breaking into comics wasn't going to happen immediately. I Part of me thought it would. They'd see me and say, "Oh, Bill, we've been waiting for you. Get to work." But um, yeah, I expected to have to support myself for a while, and yeah, put it away. Left with a little money in my pocket too.
Oh, that was very smart. I feel like we talked to a lot of creators, and in their youth, they are not as responsible as that, especially those who grow up sort of during the boom times. Like if we're talking to somebody who started in the early 90s and they're like, I'm just making money hand over fist. This is the way it's going to be forever.
Yep.
And then they learn the hard way that
Oh
that
yeah.
is
Oh
not the
yeah.
way
There
it's going
was.
to be.
I had already slithered into comics through the back door by then,
Yeah.
but um, yeah, yeah. Some of the lavish spending of just ridiculous amounts of money. Some of these new guys were making. Uh,
No.
it was a little off-putting in the sense of just do not do not count on it lasting. Um, but some people, they get the first splash of real money in their pocket. They don't have the skills and the experience to handle that.
Yeah, of course. Well, let's talk about your break. You said D&D. Everybody knew, including yourself, that as soon as some comics opportunity came along, you were out of there. So, what was that opportunity, or was it something you sort of made for yourself? I'm speaking, of course, about well, maybe this is a little farther down the line, but Elementals was one of your earlier works, which is sort of yours to begin with. So I don't know if that was something you kind of came up with and sort of left on your own, or if there was some sort of assignment or other people kind of reaching in and being like, forget that D&D stuff, you're with us now.
Yeah, the first comics work. Well, the first comics work was while I was at TSR doing the D&D ads in the back of Marvel comics. So that got me some experience of doing panel by panel stuff, which is, boy, I wish I'd known. There was so little information on how to train yourself to do comics at the time I was getting in. There was how to draw comics the Marvel way, uh, but that was more splash rather than substance. There's a little bit of stuff in there. I did learn finally from that book that comics pages were drawn larger than they were actually printed. Until then, I always thought they were drawn the same size, and I couldn't understand how they could get such incredible work, so detailed, whereas I was, drawing with a stick, I think. Um, so I learned a few things, but uh, the TSR ads taught me panel to panel things. If you're going to break in, that's the one thing you have to do. Just quit drawing, big splash pages of men in tight suits jumping off of buildings, because they want to see, can you draw, you know, normal scenes, 6, 7, 8 panels in a page and tell a story. So I was trying to do that. The entire time I'm at TSR, in addition to working there, I'm doing sample pages. 6 sample pages. I sent them off to John Romita Sr., who was the Marvel art director. What I didn't understand is that the art director was in charge of the bullpen, who did, Marvel ads, and they did correction work on pages that came in, all of that kind of stuff. The people that handed out jobs were the editors. I didn't know that. So I sent in these samples to John Romita, but he gets on the phone with me uh, and goes page by page of everything I did right, everything I did wrong, and shouldn't have done it. It wasn't his job. It was just this gift of a truly generous man. Spent an hour on the phone with me, going through my sample pages, and explained that he wasn't really the guy I should be trying to break in with anyway. Um, but I did something that he said that had never been done before, um, which is I took his advice. In the next week, I redrew those 6 pages with his corrections, and sent him back in. He says, no one's ever turned this around before. And yes, you are going to do comics, because the one thing the editors are really looking for is not just can you draw, but will you draw quickly enough to get work in this business. Um, so, and all that was while I was at TSR, drawing during the day for TSR. When I finally left TSR and moved to New York and showed up because an editor who shall not be named, uh, I made a couple of trips out there in person, and she looked at my stuff, went gaga over it, and said, "Oh, you're gonna get work here right away." Um, I took her at her word. I went back and quit TSR, packed up my stuff, and moved to Long Island. Uh, Gave her a call and said, "Okay, I'm here." And she didn't remember who I was. And I explained, "Well, I was just there. You said I would be getting work right away." And she goes, "Well, I don't actually have the ability to assign work. I'm an assistant editor. Um, and now that you're in the area, I mean, all I can really do is show your stuff to the editors, the ones who can. But now that you're here, you can do that on your own. Good luck. Bye." And so I was stuck out there, and a little let down. And at the same time, the whole or the first beginnings of the independent movements in mainstream style comics. I mean, there were underground comics and things like that, Robert Crumb type stuff.
Right.
But there was, Marvel comics and that and nothing in between. But it just started. The Pacific Comics had started. First Comics hadn't quite made themselves known yet, but and Capital Comics with Nexus and that. Um, there was a little outfit called Noble Comics that did something called Justice Machine, and it
Hmm.
was okay. It was like a little primitive, a little um, tenuous, but um, real comic stories with superheroes. This is what I wanted to do. Anyway, I decided I'm going to send out samples to every single one of these new companies and get work somehow if I'm not good enough for Marvel or DC yet. And I wasn't good enough for Marvel or DC yet. Um, but I decided, like for Marvel and for DC, I did samples of their characters. They want to see their characters. Well, I'm not going to do. There's half a dozen or more of these new companies. I'm not going to do separate samples for each one. So I said, well, let's come up with a superhero team that whose only purpose is to show that I know how to draw and tell a story. So I did 6 pages of the Elementals. Um, I got the idea one from uh, a year at TSR where okay, the Elementals are creatures you can run into, and I while drawing them from time to time, I said, this could be a good theme for a superhero group. And then in a Comics Journal interview, Byrne, who I was still enamored of, uh, said his Fantastic Four is really kind of the four elements. I mean, Reed Richards is water, Sue Storm is air, etc., fire,
Yeah.
earth. And so I said, "What the hell? I can rip that idea off, and just formally do four elemental based characters," and sent those out as samples. Uh, Mike Gusovich from Noble Comics got on the phone. Had to have been the atomic moment he got them in the mail, and he was on the phone to me and said, "This is great. Come out and work for Noble Comics." So I packed up my stuff, got on a bus, um, went to Grand Rapids, Michigan, um, and he met me at the bus, and we had a walk and talk. And I said, "So, what what will I be doing for Noble Comics?" I assumed I would be drawing their characters. Uh, and he looked very concerned at me, like I was addlebrain. He goes, "Well, you're going to do that comic you pitched us, these Elementals." And I'm like, "Oh, that was a pitch. I was just providing proof that I knew how to draw." But of course, what I said was, "Oh yeah, well, of course I'm doing that." I meant that. Did you want me to work on
What
other stuff
else?
as well? Yes.
Yeah.
That's how the Elementals existed. And then I had to come up with a story to go with them because apparently we were doing it as a book. Um, yeah, that's how I broke in.
Well, that's I mean, doing that though, being able to uh I don't know, adapt to your sort of new circumstance and now coming up with a story and a whole new world. Um, I would imagine looking back on it that was probably a really good way to break in because it gave you some fundamental skills and knowledge of putting something together from scratch, which maybe gave you, you tell me, but gave you a little bit more once you moved on from elementals and moved on to into other books. You had this deep well of experience or small well of experience, putting together, um, as I said, something from scratch, something that you've built out of nothing. Did you see it that way, or did you see it more as a fundamental challenge? Like, oh no, I have to get something together
There was
now.
a little bit of oh no panic, but uh, I had some swagger at the time. I was feeling my oats. I figured I could do this, especially for a small company. What do they know? There's new at this as I am. Um, uh, yeah, yeah, there was a bit of the worst thing that can happen uh, in trying to make it in the comics is that no one will hire you. The second worst thing is that someone will hire you and you have to actually do the work. Um, there's a lot of people out there that could draw me under the table, out of the room, you know, off the charts with their drawing skill, but they couldn't get work turned in. Um, that that made or break. So yeah, I was able to in the early days get work turned in. Um, at the same time, um, I knew nothing about the business of being in the business.
Hmm.
All these, how to do comics. Someone should do a manual on how to be in the business of comics and some of the crap you're going to have to face and some of the growing up you're going to have to do. Um, for example, with the Elementals, and when it eventually landed at Kamiko, um, and did quite well, uh, made a bit of a splash in the indie comic scene. But Kamiko, they were a brand new company. They were having the same trouble learning how to be businessmen and businesswomen as I was. And so they were constantly in violation of our contract and this and that. And the only way to really get their attention is when their sins became too egregious. I would just stop working, and eventually they'd realize, oh, no pages are coming in. What's wrong? And then we'd settle it. That's a terrible, terrible method of getting anyone's attention because their names weren't on the book. Anytime delays were caused like that, um, even though in my mind it was their fault for you know they were uh, they were not doing what they were supposed to do. Uh, they were behind pay, et cetera, et cetera. But no reader's going to look at a late comic and say, oh, they probably screwed Willingham over again with the late payment or the this or the that or the nonsense that any publisher will get into. No, they're going to look at, my name, creator, the only real name associated with the elementals, and say, oh, that Willingham, he is a slow fellow. Um, yeah, so that took the business of learning the business of comics uh, took a while. Uh, I'd spent my entire youth and young adulthood trying to learn to draw comics. I should have, like everyone, I should have taken a business. I should have learned the other things associated with uh, being a professional in this business.
Uh, there seems to be no course about that. I've heard that from others as well, and it's the part you think it's. I worked at Marvel for a couple of years, not as an
Right.
artist or writer, but um, it doesn't you're not prepared based on the product that is being put out, and I hate to call it a product, but based on the content that it's putting out, you just kind of think, or you assume that the business part is everybody on the same creative page trying to put stories together and make the best cohesive um story and comic book that they can. And I think that assumption gets blown up really quickly once you're at the businesses and try to understand how they work as businesses.
Yes.
And no one prepares you for that. It's sort of a shock of cold water, I think, no matter what capacity you're in once you get into the industry.
Yeah. And people, by a lot of people that would run over their own grandmother to get a better book to work on, or or what have you. There was a lot of ambition, um, and there were mostly at that time I was doing work for Kamiko and occasionally at DC. Um, More than once, there was like this startling. Uh, I mean, editors at DC that they were very corporate, and they would, move the material through, and they would dress less casually than over at Marvel. Um, so I thought, all right, these are real business people. This is a better environment for me. I think I could get along better here. But in the midst of this, then suddenly one of them would break out into, you know, how dare someone at Marvel give an interview that says Wolverine is so much cooler than Lobo, and he just went off on this foaming tirade, and I go, oh my god, this is one of the people with my career in his hands, and really this is what's important to him during the working day. um, I found that there was a lot of laissez-faire in how this was conducted. I was living in Philly at the time. I'd take the train up to New York to talk with Andy Helfer, uh, a fellow at DC Comics, um, and I didn't have a lot of money then. So when I went there for an arranged meeting, I expected an arranged meeting to occur. But instead, I would show up and he goes, "Oh man, a new Godzilla just came out at Forbidden Planet, so we're gonna head out there and do that." I mean, that's the kind of stuff that would occur instead of getting work done. And I
Hmm.
also found that DC, at least, I have no idea how the Marvel culture was in this regard. DC was in love with meetings. They would take meetings to plan meetings, and at the end of it, nothing's decided. Well, so we're going to do this. We're not there yet. Well, we got to have more meetings, and I just loathed that aspect of it. Um, but yeah, you have to learn that part too,
Yeah.
uh, if you're going to do this.
Yeah. That corporate culture, I think, rings true, um, no matter what industry you're in.
Yeah. Sorry, I just got handed an important note.
Sure.
Yeah. Lots of
Um,
decisions made in the comics world, kids. So we
uh,
we can never
so
stop working.
yeah, I wanted to talk more about your, I guess your craft, because you started as an artist writer, and
Yes.
eventually, you had done less art and more writing. When did that transition occur, and how did it was it something you wanted to do in order to keep ahead of the work, or did you feel like there would be other artists that would express your ideas better? Tell me a bit more about it.
When I entered comics, I thought the structure was you're an artist or a writer, but not both. Turns out that was only true some of the time. There were plenty, even at that time, artists and writers both. Joe Kubert was writing a lot of his own stuff, etc. Um, I thought I had to pick one, and like, well, I like drawing them, so I'll break in as an artist, and did that. And uh, with Elementals, I had to write my own because, well, as we discovered, I didn't realize I was pitching a comic book. I thought I was just just trying out as an artist. So I did that, and that gave me a little experience, and I became a little spoiled, um, because the writer side of me could come up with things that I thought as an artist were just too darn cool. Um, but I'm working with DC Comics too, and the thing about producing a page of comics is it's tough. I mean, it's not physically ditch digging grueling, um, but it's it's spiritually, emotionally, and to a certain extent physically draining to produce a comic page in a day, and then to get up the next day and have to do it again and again and again for years at a time. And there just came a time when I thought, you know, to put in all this hard work, I wish I was getting better stories to do. Some of them were just not my cup of tea. And inevitably, I decided to, well, the only way to ensure doing stories I want to do is to do them, to write them as well. And then I changed over because um, people will tell you that writers and artists do about the same amount of work, um, but that's nonsense. Uh, you could write several books, you could draw one if you're about my speed. Uh, Jack Kirby, John Byrne could draw like 6 books a month, which is mind-boggling. I'm not sure how that could happen, but it did. But I could do one, maybe. Uh, so it was a matter of, well, now I'm writing and drawing 6 books. Writing is going to make me more money. I know that seems um, capitalistic to an extreme. The artiste part of me is wailing and moaning now inside of me, but as opposed to picking one book and just doing that, drawing forever. Uh, so it was kind of half practical. Uh, I would love to be able to draw more, but I'm slow. I I was fast when I wasn't too worried about what was coming out of my pen and pencil and ink brush, and uh, but now my drawings are more meticulous, and so I'm really too slow to do like a regular book. But I write and I enjoy it. Uh,
We heard much the same reasoning from a lot of inkers, actually, that, they came up as pencilers, as artists, and they were just too slow to get the work done that they knew they could and have it done on time, but they could ink, 2, 3 pages for every one page that they could
yeah.
pencil. And so they fell into that. And a lot of inkers actually have become writers as well. It's interesting, that kind of pipeline. Um, so I wanted to talk about Fables, which is, I guess, still considered maybe your magnum opus, certainly the longest title that you wrote for it, over 150 issues, part of Vertigo. I guess I want to talk about the kind of longevity of the title and writing something like that. Now, they were broken up into storylines, that had,
Yes.
such as it was, beginning and end. But um, how did you see, once it started becoming successful, how did you see a job in sustaining sort of the narrative, and keeping it interesting for yourself, knowing that it possibly could run as long as it did?
Well, just before Fables, I'd done quite a few things for DC Comics, specifically for Shelley Roberg, who then got married and is now Shelley Bond. But uh, she came on to Kamiko just in its last dying days. It was her very first job out of college. Um, so even though everyone at Kamiko knew it was dying, she was kind of like the brand new, golly gee, wow, I'm Jimmy Olsen. This is going to be great. We're going to put on a show and use my grandpa's barn to do it, and etc. She was that kind. And apparently she had this fondness for those days that transcended, uh, I think, any practical experience that she got there. So one day out of the blue, she approaches me at some party and says, "Do you remember me? I'm working at DC now, and you got to come and write comics for me." So I would pitch stuff to Shelley Roebuck or Shelley Bond eventually. Um, and each of those things uh, kind of garnered a few critical reviews that said this is pretty good stuff, but sales in the dozens. I mean, they were just the sales of just about everything I did there were crap. Um, but I kept trying, kept plugging away. Uh, I assumed Fables was going to be another one of those things that, oh, good idea, and a couple of the comics critics, we still had them back then, enjoyed it, uh, but it wouldn't sell well. Uh, so I was prepared for it to end whenever. Um, as a matter of fact, when I pitched it, Karen Berger was still at running Vertigo at the time. Uh, she said this is okay. We're going to do this, but maybe just make it a 6-issue miniseries. And because I don't know, I had a feeling about the idea, and I said, no, we gotta do an ongoing series, and maybe it'll end up only being 6 issues, but let's swing for the fences and not just try for an on base. Um, and so I held to my guns. I'm not sure why. Um, it's it, I wasn't making a lot of money then, so it's not as if I had um, screw you money, to insist on having it my way. But anyway, we ended up doing it, and it took off. It took off for a number of reasons. One, um, uh, Jeanette Kahn, who is now a movie producer out in Hollywood, she was on her way out the door, but was still running DC at the time, and she took a liking to it. Basically, told the others that were questioning whether or not this was a good move. She said, "Yeah, we're doing it." Um, so they had to make a deal. Um, so she was in my corner, uh, and Bob Wayne, who was DC's marketing and that guy,
Yeah.
the fixer, the um, you know the guy who sends the leg breakers out when that's necessary. I'm sure Marvel had one too, but
And you're late on your pages.
yeah, a Texas guy. And for years, I thought he loathed me, um, because he was from Texas and I had Texas friends. Anytime I was going to see Bob Wayne, I was required to say, "So Caroline says hello, Warren says hello, et cetera, et cetera." Old Texas gang. Um, but I thought he just didn't think much of me at all. Uh, but he liked it. And when the head of DC marketing likes it, you have a pretty good champion in your corner. And so um, they don't promote everything. They pick and choose the things that they're going to promote, and that may be unfair, but it's just the way it is. But they got behind it in a big way, and yeah, it took off. So after a couple of story arcs, it looked like, well, this is going to run as long as we want it to. It was helped by the fact that Mark Buckingham, the artist, uh, decided he loved the book, wanted a place to call his home, and informed Shelley that he would be staying on the book forever. Um, no one does that. No artist stays on a book very long anymore. That used to
No,
be the case back when, but now artists, they are um, fickle group. I don't mean that unkindly. It's just like, I'm drawing this now. I want to go draw this. I want to go
right.
draw this. Bucky stayed with it. Bucky stayed with it for 150 issues. Who does that? Um, it
Not many.
wouldn't have had the legs it had without him. He's probably more responsible for Fable's success than me. James Jean, who did the covers and who was just a godsend. James Jean we were looking for, someone big and extraordinary to do the covers. The day after he graduated from art school, he came to DC and showed his portfolio around. Shelley got on the phone with me, and it was a computer age, so I could look him up and see his stuff. And we decided to hire him on the spot on that day. So, and he took off, as you probably know. I think he gets a lot of the credit too, because he was just masterful. And it didn't the covers for Fables didn't look like anything else on the stands, and
Yeah,
that
for
is
sure.
such a boon when you're trying to compete against all those other books. um, he's probably the only one I know who is an overnight success. I mean, he left art school and got this gig the next day that kind of put him on the map, and then he was off to the races, with, well, then he was getting work from Scientific American and from, what's the fashion thing he did a lot of stuff for, and Playboy and this and that,
Vogue.
and getting real money, much more than he could afford. uh, I mean, DC could afford to pay him. He was at the top DC cover rate almost immediately, and then never got another raise for many years, because that's all they allowed. And yet he stayed with Fables for 85 issues, long after he didn't need to do that, because it was like Fables for the little pittance, and then all this other stuff
Yeah.
for the big pittance. Excuse me. So, these forces came together, and I was at least crafty enough to say, okay, these are giants on whose shoulders I can ride myself to a certain amount of victory. Um, and yeah, it worked out. It was something. At no time during Fable's run did I believe it was going to last, because I don't.
Really.
Well, I just, you know, man plans and God laughs. It's just, I expect
Yeah.
the hammer to fall at any time. Um, but in hindsight, yeah, it worked out pretty good.
Sounds like a TV series that you hear about where the showrunner says, we just expected to get canceled every year, and so we threw everything we had at it uh, during the time we were making it,
Well,
and
yeah, that
and
is one
just
lesson, is spend all your stuff right up front. Don't plan for a long
right.
legacy. There were so many things I planned, and especially when you work with other people's characters, like DC's characters, they own them and stuff like that. If you're going to write them, don't make long range plans, because they can snatch them away from you in a moment, and
Right.
they have from me many times. They're not your characters; they're not your toys to play with. If you've got good ideas for stories, get them in quick, because they can go away right away. And I had that attitude with Fables. We put everything we could into it at all times, thinking maybe this will come out and then we'll be canceled.
Right. Don't wait.
It paid
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
Spend all of your cool stuff quickly. Um, we were talking about the people that have money for the first time and don't know how to do it, and they just go and spend wildly.
Right.
In the arts, you should do that. You should, that creative bucket of yours can only hold so much at a time. So use it all, and that way it can be filled up again with more good stuff. So yeah, we did it. We hit and missed uh, occasionally. I think the misses story wise are on me, um, but we always tried to just put it all out there, everything that we could think of and that we could do at any given time. There's probably a lesson there.
I think the misses were few and far between. Um, when did so knowing that you were doing this and this was kind of a going concern, although always in the back of your mind that might be pulled away or canceled or what have you. When did you know, or was it preordained somehow from DC itself, when to end the series and how to end the series? Is it something you even thought about early on, even though you were,
Oh yeah, yeah.
trying to not plan things out too much?
We didn't plan everything rigidly, but I knew fairly quickly in the story that the last Fables issue would end when Geppetto is spirited out of the Empire into Fabletown, and he's forced to sign the Fabletown Compact. That was the end. And then we could just fit as much stuff in between until we get to that end, but we know what the ending's going to be. I was frustrated in some earlier books like Coventry and things that, in that case, I couldn't keep doing it enough to make money. And so we got 3 issues into it and the story never ended. That I hated leaving stories unfinished. So the one thing I was determined to do was we have to bring it to an end if we're going to stop. The trouble with that plan was we weren't cognizant that Fables was going to be as successful as it was, that we could keep doing it for a long time. And so that ending I had in mind was starting to get a little stale in my mind. Like, too much of it was now locked in, and I didn't like the idea of not having that freedom to stretch and grow. So we decided to do the ending and then keep going. The ending that eventually happened was more a case of, okay, we can kind of, it's now thoroughly an ensemble. We can kind of see all these important characters and where they might end up. Maybe it's time to have them end up, to make sure that no matter what, no matter how successful it is, and that I could have kept doing it for some time, it how stupid would I feel as if it like died or hit by a bus or whatever and left the thing unfinished. I just didn't want that. So it's like that was one consideration. Bring it to an end. And another one is that, well, I guess I know how to do this, but there are other things I want to try and possibly fail at doing. Stories I wanted to do, more prose work, etc. Maybe I should wrap this up and go on to other stuff. And so inevitably we did. And hopefully not not too late. Nothing's worse than, well, like a hit show, like The Office, where they held on for one season too long. They should have known when to end it, and instead, you don't want to end a success, but they should have known. So I didn't want to have that one season of Fables hanging over me. It was like, I wish we would have cut it off just 6 issues sooner.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, but it was it was a decision that took years to arrive at. We did it for 13 years, which once again, Bucky, no one does that anymore. What were you thinking? But yeah, we did it for 13 years. Uh, so I doubt anyone could really float the argument that it went on too long or ended too soon. Is what I meant. But
Sure.
yeah,
You have in Fables, as well as projects before and after, incorporated a lot of folklore and mythology and literary characters. Um, do you do a lot of research into these pre-existing stories? I mean, in some ways, they're just older versions of what comic book characters are to begin with, right? Which they have their own histories. But do you do a lot of
sure.
research into this? And what does that look like for when you're preparing for these type of
Well, yes
stories?
and no. Oddly enough, um, and I do not mean to toot my own horn, but during the height of Fables run, where it was getting a lot of attention, it's getting a lot of attention out of Hollywood and out of um, the scholarly community, like real folklorists and things like that. That there were um, doctors of this or that that were doing their dissertations on fables, um, and presenting them from time to time in a public venue, uh, which as often as I could, I would show up uh, clandestinely and see if they really do know what Fables is about. Um, I always wanted to do that Marshall McLuhan scene in Woody Allen's film Annie Hall, where he just pulls the expert out from behind the marquee, so he could say, "Yeah, I'm the fellow you're talking about, and you don't know what you're talking about."
Yeah.
I would have loved to have done that, but actually, pretty much, I had no arguments to pick with these folks. But from time to time, they would refer to me as a folklore scholar, and I keep wanting to look behind me to see who they're talking about, because you know I I re I my research and my scholarship is all, I love reading that stuff, so I read that stuff a lot. That's it. Um, and think in terms of, well, what what could I do with this character and that and this situation and that, which any writer is going to do. Um, so yeah, uh,
It's
research.
yeah.
It did
Research is
pay off
reading.
though. Yes, research is reading. For a long time, friends knew what to give me as gifts. They just gave me some fairy tale book or whatever, and it's like,
So it sounds like things are, textual rather than contextual. Like you're not looking for the stories behind the stories or trying to interpose. You're just taking this is what happened in these stories, and I'm just looking maybe as how these characters would react and interact in my own world that I've set up. I'm not looking for the little cracks in the stories where something may have happened and scholars say the author would have put his own impression on it. It's really just kind of taking the most well-known impression of the stories and characters and kind of playing with it.
the best I can offer is looking at any material, saying, what can I do with this that is exciting, fun, interesting, entirely according to my own lights. Like, like, what can I do with this that I find worth pursuing? Um, and that's it. It's like the best. someone someone said in a different context. I think he was working at one of those big slick fashion magazines, but he was kind of a tyrant about it. And when receiving complaints about his decisions, he says that, look, no magazine can survive the mistakes of more than one person. So this may be an error, but it's going to be my errors. And that's it. And I've always had the same attitude about storytelling. It's like, yeah, I may make lots of mistakes, but too many people second guessing, which happens so much, um, that's guaranteed to ruin it. So yeah, no comic, no story, no novel can survive the mistakes of more than one person. Um, Occasionally, uh, I'm proven wrong by two names that will collaborate with each other and produce something wonderful, but that's rare.
After Fables, you've done a number of different projects, but one that somewhat sticks out at me um, is Robin, and that's possibly because it's maybe the most straightforward superhero work you've done. I don't know if you'd also consider that because a lot of your other character-based projects are like things like Shadow Pact and the Warriors 3, which are again more, I guess, not fable-based, but mythological or
Sure.
magic driven. What attracted you to the Robin gig and maybe Tim Drake as a character, and what did you want to do with that book? And did you feel like you accomplished what you wanted?
Uh, some of it. Uh, Excuse me. The editors of the Bat office. Uh, there was a Superman office, a Batman office, where all the different books of whatever uh, were edited out of one. They called me and offered me Robin, and I had not read it in a long time. Um, so I said, "Well, I have to catch up on it before I can give you an answer." And they sent me like 50 issues, the last 50 issues of Robin. Um, and I read it, and uh, I sort of saw, well, there's things that interest me in it to make my decision. With with a lot of books, it's like, what can I do to wreck this character? Not wreck this character as in, you know, to actually wreck a good character,
Right.
but in the sense of these are action adventure heroes. So in order for them to shine, uh, you have to make their life terrible.
Right.
You know, villains and crises and whatever, pile it on and let them rise above it. But what I found interesting about Robin is that I saw it as a book about someone learning the superhero trade from the best teacher in the business. And I thought, well, that could be interesting. That the pushback I got from that was not from the editorial office. They thought that was a pretty good take on it. But the fans, they go, oh, what do you mean Robin's still learning? He's fully trained. He's just as good as Batman. How dare you have someone learning how to be a superhero when he's been established for however many issues. So there was some cranky readership there, uh, but I tried to stick with it, and I just liked that aspect of it. That, as a matter of fact, to hang a lamp on it, we even had a story arc where someone else tried to recruit him away from Batman under the aegis of, well, we like taking his proteges because he trains good fighters.
Trains them
Uh,
up.
Sort of calling attention to the fact that okay, you've learned the business now. Now let's come and serve your country, etc. Um, I thought that was a good, fun take on the character. I guess I sort of accomplished it at the same time that um, Robin was one of those characters that uh, I didn't own, and boy, there was a lot of constantly changing what I could do and what I couldn't do. Uh, I wrote one issue that got rejected that had Batman and Robin in a full mock-up of some uh, outlaw's lair built in the Batcave, so they could rehearse the way like special forces groups do, rehearse an action where they're trying to save a kidnapped little girl and get to her before they can execute her. And so they keep working it over and over and over again. It's like we got to shave 2 minutes off of this and this and the Batman editor that rejected it said, "Look, Batman doesn't need to train. He's Batman. Um, you might have Robin train a bit, but even that's like, no, nah, this doesn't work. It 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 makes no sense. And the more you train, not the less. I mean, imagine the great achiever in any realm saying, "Well, I've achieved so much. I'm so good. I don't ever need to practice. I don't, you know, Billy Joel doesn't need to practice playing the piano anymore, or whoever and whatever." It was so foreign to me that anyone could say this seriously that it just boggled my mind. Um, so that kind of stuff happened. But uh, another thing that happened is I was laying the groundwork for a very long story arc that would carry over from many smaller arcs, wherein uh, Tim Drake had slowly discovers that he's Robin and makes him quit. Um, and I was just loving the careful building of this. And then the word came down from, I think, Identity Crisis or something like that, that every office needs to offer up a victim to be killed for some big event. And the Bat Office decided to kill off Robin's dad. Uh, and all that work about carefully planning a long arc just went away, and they said, "Oh, you can still do it, but he's got to do it in the next 4 issues because after that he's dead." Um, those kind of things frustrate uh, big plans. Another reason I said that, if
Yeah.
you're using other people's characters, don't make big plans. You won't get there. So I hurried it up and I did the old Willie discovers it by finding Robin's uniform in a hidden closet. And it's like, oh, I mean, that moment even stunk to me, but it's like we had to get to the confrontation in one issue. So
Right.
that's what we did.
Yeah. You just referenced your own um, sage advice from, not waiting, especially when you're playing with somebody else's toys, because what happened could happen at any
Yeah.
point.
And it happened a lot. I mean, that's one
Yeah,
example, but it happened a lot.
that's that's the lament of mainstream comics from what we've heard of many a creator. Um, so I like to. We're not going to get to everything. You have a very extensive career, and I'd love to get to more of it maybe at another time. But I like to ask this question towards the end and ask you, looking back on your work, there are some things that are very celebrated that you're proud of and you're very celebrated, things like Fables. There are things that you're proud of that maybe didn't get the audience or attention it deserves. And then there's, the opposite of that. but I'd love to know what are maybe one or two projects that you thought were really, really good, that really expressed your talent and the story you wanted to tell, that maybe just didn't get the attention you thought they deserved in the time when they came out, and we can bring a little bit more highlight to them.
Mm, yeah, that's the pitfall in that question is that you're begging whomever uh, to start bragging about himself. Um, I look at old material, old things I've done, and some of it horrifies me, and some of it said, okay, that bit wasn't so bad. Um, that's the best I can do to answer that, which is um, typically, and I'm certain I'm not alone here. When I read my old stuff again, retrospectively, all I can see are the things I wish I'd done better. And sometimes it leaps out at me. It's like, oh, what was I thinking here? The obvious thing to do would be this, you know. Once in a while, there's little bits, and they're usually not like an entire story, but just little bits within the story. Then I said, well, that wasn't so bad. Um, in Warriors 3, for example, I just wanted that moment where um, Hogan, the dour, uh, sees a train coming and decide, I've never really killed a dragon on my own, and he whacks the beginning of the front of this train and causes the whole thing to derail. And I thought, okay, visually, that's just the kind of thing that could only really happen in comic books, um, or or a scene where they're teaching the new guy who's actually a girl, but how to drink properly like a Viking. Little moments like that I enjoy, that I didn't see other books doing. My first moment ever like that was in one of the early, I think, issue 3 of Elementals, where we had a Apocalypse Now esque helicopter attack coming in for our heroes, and we had kind of dull olive green military style helicopters set against a stormy sky. So it was a dull color against a dull color, but it was actually effective. There were just enough highlights to kind of you look at that and say, oh, you can just see him coming out of the storm clouds towards you, and it was all done with coloring, but uh, I was sort of over. Janet Jackson was coloring it then, not the wardrobe malfunction Janet Jackson, but the one that worked in comics for a while, and directing her minutely. And it was just a lovely panel. And I thought it came out just exactly right. And we were up at, and she was also working at Marvel Comics and just getting in there. So we're up at Marvel, and I was picking her up for dinner or something one evening, and one of the Marvel editors was looking at this and going, "Wow, that is really, really an effective panel. It's just you made a lot of decisions that we're not allowed to make, because you have to have a bright color against a dull color, and a dull color against a bright color. You can't do this. Yeah, you did this all wrong. This is entirely wrong." I said, "Yeah, but it works. I mean, you say it's yourself, it works." So sometimes, doing something that hasn't been done yet in comics, those moments I enjoy.
And we're back. Hey there, Bill. Thank you for being on the show, and thank you for all your contributions to the world of comics and your ongoing contributions, because there's a lot more to look forward to from you. But as I said, Fables is just fantastic. Everybody go out there, read that, and read all of Bill's work. So, as we say, that'll do it for this episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits. Thank you for listening, viewing, rating, reviewing, subscribing, helping to support the show. We've got more interviews on the way. In fact, one more on Friday, and then weeks and weeks and weeks beyond that. So, thank you again, and we'll see you next issue.